Let's make a start. This is an unusual talk for me, as this is part of a new series of talks I put together in Norway, of all places. So I've never ever done this talk in England, either here or in London or Guildford or anywhere for that matter here in the UK. So this is an absolute first here for me in Totnes. I have done it previously, of course, in Norway, I think 2 or 3 times. And it's the first talk of a series. So I call this my foundational talk. And it basically gives you the key, really, to unlock the whole of metaphysical understanding. So what I'm going to do, I know it's a bold claim. So what I'm going to attempt to do today is basically walk you through, in synopsis form, really the whole of metaphysics, the whole of the understanding from God to the earth, to being a human being, and everything in terms of all the levels and all the dimensions and all the energies in between. So as you can imagine, this is going to be quite a task. I'm going to have to talk very quickly. No. So,
do you have notes for us, or should we take our own notes?
It's entirely up to you. I don't have notes for this. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, the reason why I had notes for the other stuff was because I've been doing those talks a lot longer to do with my therapy. And I was a bit more together with that.
But you're videoing it, so...
I am videoing it, yeah.
Video.
Yeah, I always like to do that somehow.
So then it goes online to your...
It'll go online and you can go and watch it again if you like. Yeah, I'm hoping to build a video library and eventually do an online video course which will basically compile elements of these talks together. And quite a few talks that I'll just be doing at home on my own around the Bhagavad Gita and such subjects that I won't be doing in public, but I will release them online in due course. I'll just get around to recording them. Okay, so I started off with this, I suppose, when I was a teenager. For me, this was an inquiry into life when I was about the age of 18. And it was 18, the ripe young age, that I became a Vedantist. I decided I wanted to go into an ashram, I wanted to go and live in India, and I wanted to study something called the Vedas. Now, who here has not heard of the Vedas? Adrian? Oh, you've heard of them, okay. So everyone knows what the Vedas are? Okay. Lucy?
Just about. Yeah.
Just about, okay. Yes. Okay. Now the Vedas really, as far as I can understand, really describe reality, they describe the nature of the soul and the nature of the human journey better than I think any other written scripture on the planet. And they predate, as far as I can understand, and I stand to be corrected on this, any other literature. The earliest writings, Vedic writings, go back around about perhaps 5,000 years or so, but the oral tradition goes back even tens of thousands of years prior to that. So this is the most ancient of teachings. So what I'm trying to do here today is to take that very ancient understanding, which is encoded into the Sanskrit language and has very flowery interpretation of our nature, and transfer that, or decode it, you might say, into a format that we can readily understand as Westerners, in English, of course. Yeah? And that's what this talk's going to do. It's basically a decoding of ancient wisdom. Okay, so let's have a look. We've got some late stragglers, yeah, come on in here.
Oh, I got stuck in Morrison's, they wouldn't let me out.
Yeah, you're out. Okay, I'm going to start with a Sanskrit phrase, and then we're going to start doing some drawings and some pictures for you guys, so you can get a visual sense of what this is all about. The Sanskrit phrase that we were taught at the very beginning of my time in the ashram was this: Achintya, Beda, Abeda, Tattva. Very simple. But it basically encapsulates the whole of Vedic or ancient understanding in this one phrase. Achintya, Beda, Abeda, Tattva. And what it means is that reality is inconceivably but simultaneously one and different. So what it's describing there is the nature of the soul. It's describing the nature of who we are in terms of our inner content. What we are, really at the core of us. And how we are distinct, or not distinct, from God. However you like to name that, or however you like to call that. So it basically says that we are one and we are different simultaneously, and yet inconceivably so, at the same time. We are one and different. And this is an interesting thing in Vedanta, because Vedanta later became divided into two streams. One was the Vaita, and one was the Advaita stream. Yeah. Now, I think most of us are familiar with the term Advaita, because this has become somewhat popularized in the West, I would say, over the last 5 to 10 years. That's commonly referred to as the oneness school, or the understanding of unity consciousness or oneness consciousness. Are you all familiar with that? And then we have the other side, which is the Vaita school, which is the dual school, which says that we are eternally a soul and eternally God is separate and distinct from who we are. Yeah, we're familiar with that. It's a bit like Christianity, or a lot of religions had that idea. But in the Vedas they had the idea that actually we were both at the same time. That we were both individual and distinct at the same time as being one and non-different. Okay? So let's draw that on the board. It's a bit of a small board actually. I'm used to a bigger one, so I'm going to try and scale what I normally draw down. So God at the top. So we're simultaneously the same as God and separate from God. Inconceivably so. Now, the old teachings, they give a metaphor, particularly in the Advaita system, of the drop of seawater that's dropped back into the ocean or the sea. And how that water then, in the drop, basically merges with the ocean. So when the drop is separate from the ocean, we have the Vaita philosophy. And when the drop enters into the ocean and merges with the ocean, we have the Advaita philosophy. But what actually happens in reality is this. The whole of the ocean merges with the drop. Yeah. Which is Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva. We are the ocean, and yet we are still individual and distinct.
Can you say that? Say it.
Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva. Yeah. Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva. So that's where the whole of the ocean merges with the drop. Can you see? So starting with this premise, we're going to be looking towards this God force, which we all are, because we are one and distinct from that. But God, in himself, really had, you might say, an inquiry. He had a desire, an impulse, you might say, to know himself. Who is he? What is he? The reason for this is because this energy here is one of no light, no colour, no form, and no movement whatsoever. God, you might say in his primordial state, is one of pure, absolute stillness, where nothing happens and will happen forever, basically. So in this state of pure stillness, it's impossible for God to cultivate an awareness or an experience or a taste of what or who he is. For that, you have to have something called relativity. You understand? You have to have a position outside of yourself whereby you can then look at yourself objectively. So to do this, God had to actually create two streams or two forms of consciousness which are the same simultaneously, yet distinct. He actually had to, in a sense, clone himself, you might say. Yeah? So we're going to look at two aspects of the divine here. One is what we're very familiar with here in the West, which is the masculine aspect, what we would call God the Father. And really this is at the root of all religious thought, philosophy, ideology, particularly here in the Western world. God the Father. And the other aspect of the divine, which is equally as whole and as complete and simultaneously the same as but different from the masculine, is the feminine. Now this is not something we're so familiar with in 21st century England, or the West for that matter, or Europe, but it is somewhat familiar in some cultures, particularly the tribal cultures and the shamanic cultures, for example. I know you have a lot of involvement with that, Heather. So that's more a feminine kind of way of realizing the self through those processes. And also going back through history, things like paganism and the old Celtic traditions, where the goddess, really, you might say, was worshipped, or there was a worship of the elemental world, or nature, or the earth. So this is all associated with the feminine side of this equation of what is God. Having done this situation here with the masculine and feminine energies, God then had a way that he could actually experience himself. He could perceive himself. But to do that, he had to go on an enormous journey. And this is the journey, really, what we would call creation. And that's what we're going to get into describing now. This journey of creation that God went on, that culminated in the human form, which was the pinnacle, you might say, of that journey, where the masculine and the feminine, having gone off into the far reaches of time and space, come together and they meet within each and every one of us as human beings. So each and every one of us is, you might say, a microcosm of this macrocosm. Yeah? Because we all have within us masculine and feminine energies. Whether we're male or whether we're female, we have that on the inside. And what I'm going to delineate here really is something that I came into over the course of the last 5 years. And I think this understanding in some respects is quite unique. I've kind of cobbled it together in a way over time. I've refined it, but it's not perfect. And it incorporates perhaps a lot of what you already understand and what you already know. But I hope it will give a much fuller and more complete picture. So, where to start? We're going to start with the feminine side, or we can start with the masculine side. So, let's see how many got. 1, 2. So we're outnumbered by the women. So I think we'll start with the feminine. Yeah. I've actually, just this afternoon, I was thinking about this talk, and I was thinking I must refine the masculine side, because the way I used to explain it in Norway was very simplified. And it's a bit more involved than that. And I think I'm going to give you guys the more involved understanding of the masculine. But we'll come to that in a little while. Okay, feminine energy. Let's have a look at this. One of the interesting things about these energies is that the feminine energy is an energy that's always rising. The masculine energy is an energy that's always falling. So the masculine energy wants to descend, and the feminine energy wants to rise up. So, as I've depicted it here, is kind of representative of how I feel it actually is. Yeah? If we look inside of our bodies, for example, the way the Kundalini force works is it's a force that rises up. We find consciousness resides in the head and it wants to fall down to meet the Kundalini in the base. So we do find this mirrored into our esoteric anatomy. So if we look at the feminine force, we can associate this with the feminine, with the mother, with the earth. Yeah? And we can see that this is a force which really lies beneath us and wants to rise up. And there are 4 or 5, but let's say 4 for now, main forces which are associated with the feminine. Now I have to say, before we go into those 4 forces, that this energy here is a mirror of this energy here. So where we have this oneness of the masculine God energy here, we have the oneness of the feminine energy down here. So we call this the undifferentiated feminine, also known as fertile chaos, which I think quite aptly describes me quite nicely. No, seriously. I'm often sitting there minding my own business, and fertile chaos comes. It totally disturbs me. Now, fertile chaos, or the feminine, as we'll call it in this instance, wanted to be impregnated by male consciousness. And the male consciousness, as all blokes know, want to impregnate the fertile chaos, or the feminine. So the desire really, or the impulse, is to come together and to meet. So what's arising out of the earth here primarily is various forms of the feminine. And the feminine really, you might say, is passive and is associated with matter and energy. Matter and energy are one and the same. Because if you look at energy, according to Einstein, E equals mc squared, I'm sure we're all familiar with that, matter is energy. So matter and energy really are one and the same. And this is the passive aspect of feminine God consciousness. The masculine side is consciousness, which is the active form of God. So we think, well, we're all conscious. In the Hindu world, in the Vedantic world, that's associated with Shiva, the masculine principle of consciousness. The feminine, which is matter and energy, is associated with Shakti, which is actually Sanskrit for energy or power. And this is something else I'm becoming to realise as I'm getting a bit older now, is that it's the women that have all the power. Women have all the Shakti, all the energy, and particularly Mei Ling. She runs circles around me. Because I used to think, well, it's those guys that have got all the power, right? We've got all the energy. We're the get up and we're the go-doers. But actually, it's the other way around in Hinduism. They see that the expressive, active, energetic, powerful component actually is the feminine. And that the whole of creation, everything, the universes, the galaxies, all matter, all life, all dimensions, is a manifestation of Shakti. That's how powerful she is. And consciousness, which is masculine, is infinitely small and tiny, and resides really at the heart of everything. But it cannot be perceived almost. It's infinitesimal compared to this feminine energy, which is just all pervasive and everywhere. And that's at every level and every dimension. You know, particularly if you look out, say, on a starry night, and you're thinking, wow, this is incredible. That's all feminine Shakti energy. That's the power of the feminine. So it made me feel like, well, I'm just going to let her get on with it. And I'm just going to take it easy. I'm not going to work so hard. She seems to love to get on with it, so I'm just going to let her get on with it. And she's better at it than I am, so what the heck? I can just sit and meditate and study and read and do what I love to do. So that's kind of where I'm at around that. But this model somewhat is sort of agreeing with me on that way. So as we're looking at the feminine, we're looking at really a quality of energy or matter which really is that of the nurturer, that of the mother, that which actually provides us with our life force and our energy. And the first thing we're going to address in this regard is what this little chap here is. Just move your bag a little bit, let's see. Is to do with a force I'm sure we're all familiar with, which is called Qi. Also known as, I think, Qi. Qi. Acupuncturists would manipulate this force through the use of their needles and through the use of moxibustion or pressure or stuff like this. But this is a feminine force because it's energy. And Qi corresponds with what the ancients would call the etheric body. The etheric and Qi are the same. We're all familiar with the etheric?
What are the names does it have, the etheric? Is it the astral body? Would you
Has
call
the-
it the astral?
No, the astral is masculine. We'll come to that in a moment. Yeah.
The etheric body.
Yeah, the vital body, the energy body, the etheric body, the etheric template, or the blueprint sometimes it's called. Yeah. Or the chi. Yeah, there are other names for it I'm going to get to in a little while because I'm going to make some distinctions with this. But I don't know any other names. Does anybody else know any other names for the etheric body? No, I think that covers it.
It's a blueprint for you.
It's actually almost an exact copy of our physical body, but in energy form.
A blueprint in that respect, okay.
Yeah. So you could say the physical component is really the densification of that energy.
Yeah.
But really it's the energy behind matter. It's the energy behind our physical life. And it is life itself. It's the life force energy. Chi. Without it, you would be dead. I remember when I was a little boy, a couple of times or so, my parents used to take me to see my deceased relatives, you know. I think like most countries in the West, they tend to lay them out there in the chapel of rest. So I was always really fascinated to go and see my granddad or my auntie or someone, you know, when they were laid out. And just to stare and just to look at them. It's quite amazing. There is something missing. There is something unquantifiable. It's hard to put into words. But life has gone from that form, and it's just this form there, and it's almost unrecognizable as that person even. Have you had this experience?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, well, why doesn't it move? You know, why is it not animated? And I was sitting there staring and thinking, why can't it just blink or move or something? But nothing can happen. It's just like stone. It's just matter. And you really realise when you're looking at a corpse or a dead body what it is in terms of the life force and how that truly animates and brings alive this otherwise dead machine. Really. And it is the feminine force, the Shakti component really, called Chi, that enlivens this physical vessel. Chi is all around us. In fact, Chi is all around the earth. It's everywhere around us on planet Earth because the earth is associated with the feminine. So Chi is there. Permeates the earth. In fact, we have an envelope of Chi which goes around the earth. But most of us can no longer draw the Chi into our body directly from this envelope. So we get it mostly through our food, through water, through air, and I also understand that we can get it also from sunlight. I don't quite know how. I think it goes into the solar plexus center here. So we have to have this chi constantly being drawn into our body. This is what I would call universal chi. And then it becomes the bodily chi when we actually ingest it and digest it. And that's what happens at the level of our etheric body. The etheric body effectively digests the chi that we've ingested. And then it can make use of that energy. And it channels that energy in specific rivers or channels through the etheric body called meridians, like rivers of chi. And this is my little chap here. Ooh, that's his sugar lump just gone. Here he is. And you can see this is basically the meridian system as described by the Chinese. So these are all the various channels pertaining to the flow of chi. And every one of these channels relates to an organ. So why is it we've got all this chi and we're almost walking through it every day and we're surrounded by it in nature and yet we can't absorb it directly? It's because something that happened to us here in our belly. We have, as you know, down here in the tummy area, loads of coils, lots of tubes, all this kind of digestive stuff going on down here. And basically this operates as a battery. This whole area here is a battery for chi. And we can store it here, literally in our guts. And the Chinese had a term for this. They call it the hara. And there are times really when the hara is very low and it's deflated, and there are times when it's actually inflated when we ingest a lot of chi. But really the way that we would get chi directly into the hara is through a gateway here in the umbilicus, which was open when we were building this physical body in the womb, but became closed off the moment we were born, because the umbilicus was severed. And this little gateway here is called the Tantien. Have we all heard of the Tantien in the hara? So the Tantien basically opens to the etheric envelope of the earth. And it should draw chi or life force energy straight into the body and inflate the hara. Right? And there are certain practices, mostly Chinese, but also yogic practices that one can do and you can practice, which actually open up the Tantien. And these are usually associated with things like Tai Chi, Qigong, and the martial arts, where they open up this Tantien and pull in massive amounts of the Qi force, fills the hara, and they become very powerful, full of life, full of Shakti, full of this feminine energy. Yeah? You can do amazing things once you have that amount of energy flowing through your system. There is a situation with Qi as it flows around the body, through these rivers, through these meridians, like it becomes modified. So as the Qi, which is universal, flows into the meridians and into each organ, it turns in its quality, it changes in its quality into something called organ Qi. So every organ has its specific type of Qi, depending upon the astrality or the astral nature of the organ. And you'll understand that in a little while, but take it for now, that every organ has a certain astral nature which changes the quality of the Qi to something. And 30 to 40% of all of our organ Qi is contributed to making the next thing, vital force energy, something called Qing. Chinese term, obviously. Does everybody here, well, who hasn't heard of Qing? Okay, about half.
Qing or Jing?
Qing. We're going to get to Jing after Qing. Qing first. Yes. I'm right here, Qing.
Qing.
So roughly speaking, about 30 to 40%, some say anywhere up to maybe half, of our entire life force energy, in terms of our organ Qi, including the brain organ Qi, is contributed to manufacturing this one form of Qi called Qing, which is a very, very dense form of Qi, very dense. And it's only manufactured in two parts of the body. Actually, only in one part for men and one part for women. And you can probably guess. So for men, Qing is created in the testes, and for women, Qing is created in the ovaries. And all organs, including the brain, contribute up to nearly half of their life force energy to create this precious commodity, Qing. Now, when I went into the temple, we were taught celibacy. Yes.
I noticed I did that, but I didn't mean to.
Oh, okay, sorry. Not picking on you or anything. When we went to the temple, we were practicing celibacy. And one of the main reasons for the practice of celibacy was the preservation, the strengthening, the cultivation of our Qing. Because Qing, when it actually becomes built up in our body through celibacy, nourishes the brain. The brain, in terms of its energy and its capacity, is fueled by Qing. But it is the one energy that is lost during, well, one of two, including Jing, which is the next one, but it's lost during orgasm. For men, we lose it to the universe, and to women, not so critical, they lose it to the uterine lining and the reproductive organs and the surrounding tissues. And then menstruation then causes a loss of the Qing that is accumulated there also. So we tend to, as it were, lose this energy and we expend it basically through orgasm. And therefore, that's why celibacy was really always recommended and really enforced. And I've noticed for myself when I was about 20 years old, 21, after 2 years of celibacy or so, how powerful my mind and my body became. It was amazing. I had a brain like a computer. And in fact, in many ways, it hasn't gone down much since then, thankfully. Well, it has a little bit. But back then, it was incredible. I could remember things just by hearing them. Numbers, words, scriptural quotes, I could just hear them and remember them and recite them days later. This was the powerful Qing force in the body. It took me 2, maybe 3 years before I could cultivate that kind of mental energy. It gives you a lot of energy for meditation because you get the capacity to really focus your mind when you have a strong Qing energy in your body. I did used to notice on those odd occasions in the middle of the night when unfortunate things can happen that I would lose some of my Qing. And boy, it was like a zombie. I was like a zombie the next day. It took me 3, 4, maybe a whole week to recover. I was so sensitive to it. And I was so happy to be celibate and so happy to be back in that again. I hardly even notice it these days. It's like, is it there, is it not there? I don't know. Yes.
When a woman reaches the menopause,
Yes.
does the Qing level off, or?
Yes, the Qing would then start to, as you rightly point out, not be expelled and expand through orgasm. Menopause is not a prerequisite in terms of not to have sex again or anything like that. So you could continue still expending, but there's less likelihood that there would be so much loss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But there wouldn't be so much gain either.
Not much, no. Yes?
So wouldn't it be, I speak in an exploratory way because I'm not sure,
Yes.
but wouldn't it be that if the sort of female strength thing with menopause, sort of levels out,
Yes.
that possibly the male would rise a bit, and therefore that would replace the feminine aspect, and so that would compensate for the male energy. So the Qing might sort of rise a little bit.
It might rise a little bit.
Yeah. Just an
During
idea.
menopause or after menopause.
Yeah, because, it's, when everyone's rushing about being very fertile.
Fertile chaos, yeah.
Actually, whereas the mental faculties do seem to develop after menopause.
Do they?
Yes, I've noticed.
Oh, right. You've noticed that, have you?
I have.
Wow, okay. And this lady's nodding.
I have.
Yeah.
Michael's nodding also.
Yeah.
Everybody else is too young. We've got all that. You've got that to look forward to then, yeah. I think as guys we can keep going until we die, can't we? And this also does bring on that sort of old age syndrome, because the more Qing we expend, particularly early in our life, it kind of hastens in old age, really, because we start to lose our faculties, our abilities for concentration, for focus, for memory in particular, is affected by depletion of the Qing in our bodies, particularly as men, because we lose it so wholesale in the semen. It's gone. It's expanded out into the universe. Whereas for women, it's not quite the same. There is some retention of that within their bodies. Yeah. But interesting about menopause. That's yeah.
You're not losing blood, are you, either? Anymore. So you said something about the blood loss.
Yeah, because the lining of the uterus.
So you're
the
not
tissue.
losing it anymore, so you're retaining
Yes, exactly. You're retaining it.
it. You're not losing it anymore.
Yes, there is a greater retention. Yes, I would have thought. Absolutely right. And I think from what you're saying is that things do improve.
Yes, so the balance wouldn't be constant or dropping on the feminine side, less
Yes.
ability to absorb Qing. It would be slightly rising because of the change.
Yes, I've never thought of that before, but you're absolutely right. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your testimony bears it out, so,
Yeah.
so that's the main thing. Yes. Nikki? And Lucy after that, yeah. Oh, you're just scratching your head?
No,
Oh.
I was going to say what Sue said. If you're not losing it, if you're not losing it from reproductive organs, then
Yeah.
your body would retain it.
It
It's
does.
got capacity, wouldn't it?
Yes, it nourishes the brain.
It will be able to use that, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, it nourishes every organ in the body. Every organ in the body, in a way, has contributed to the high cost. You imagine almost half of your life force energy, is being dedicated to making this one thing. If you think about it. And it is said, I think in some Chinese ideas of these energies, that we are really, in a way, Qing manufacturing machines. In some respects, because we need to reproduce. you know, healthy Qing gives healthy sperm and it gives healthy ova. So then we can reproduce easily. That's very important, because if that didn't happen, it would be the end of the show for humankind. So this resource of Qing and this ability to reproduce successfully is uppermost. Survival.
It's interesting, really, because you talk about when you were in the ashram, how you cultivated this, but we have almost the opposite thing encouraged here. And especially
West,
with
yeah.
so much pornography as well,
Yeah.
where it's almost like if you're not like that, you're not being really.
You're not being normal, no.
And
Yeah.
that must be really destructive.
Yeah, I saw something the other day, another month probably, about how we Brits, we're not very much into making love and having sex, you know, like the French or the Italian, you know, they do it far more often than us guys in England, apparently. I don't know how they get these statistics. But somehow they arrive at saying that we're not very amorous, really, as a race, as Brits. And, you know, fellows on the continent are at it like rabbits, you know, all the time, you know. But you can imagine, you know, the amount of Qing that must be expended, because it must be that maybe 2 or 3 times a week this is actually being just burnt up. Just continuously, every week, for the entirety of a person's life. And, you know, and eventually it does result in a depletion of your organs, a depletion of the body, and a depletion particularly of the mental faculty. We'll get to that near the end of this talk, when we look at the masculine side, and we see how Qing is so important for mental function.
Is this why, when they say that athletes shouldn't have sex before a big match, or
Yeah,
whatever,
that's it.
that's the reason?
They know it. It makes them weak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it lost if you have sex without an orgasm?
No, I don't think so. It's the orgasm itself that's when it's expended.
Is it the orgasm or is it ejaculation? Because this is the tantric teaching, isn't it?
Yeah, I was just going to come to that. Yeah, thank you. And Lucy, you had a question, but I'll come back to that. Yeah.
Is there any other way of using it? And
Yes,
does it really
there is.
absorb men's Qing?
Well, there is that. And I think to some degree there is an absorption there. We used to learn when we were in the temple that women were like vampires. And they were basically just wanting to suck our semen out of us all the time. So it could be a mineral deficiency, yeah. So we were, we didn't get a great impression of women.
You weren't meant to have.
No, some of the stuff we were taught, it was amazing. My hair curl. It was just... We used to have these special classes for brahmacharis. Brahmacharis are celibate monks. So we'd have the guy that's the most fired up guy in the whole ashram, just come along and just drill us like a drill sergeant, you know, once a month, in terms of how bad it is to be with women, and they just want your semen, and it's just, you know, it's just a no-go deal, and it's just... And now women got stronger through that, and now men got weaker. Yes, so there is an understanding in that way, yeah. Absolutely, because some of the Qing is transferred into the feminine body and absorbed into the body. Yeah.
I heard it's psychic energy as well.
Say again, Missy?
Is it psychic energy as well?
I don't know about psychic. I would say it would be more the masculine, which we'd come to next, in terms of what we're working here at the higher centres. It's more nurturing, nourishing energy. Actually, primarily it's nourishing.
Really?
Primarily, yeah. The Qing. It's denser than Qi. It's closer to physical reality than Qi. That's why in an orgasm you can feel the release of that as a sensation on the nervous system. It impacts on the nervous system when it's released. That gives you the sensation of the orgasm, along with Jing, which we'll get to next.
And you can lose it other ways.
Yes, you can lose it through stress. It burns it up. Drug use also burns it up. Any kind of drug, any kind of altered experience like that will burn up huge amounts of Qing and Jing, which is next.
If that's the case with the feminine, winning energy, in a sort of sexual way, wouldn't men be also gaining some of that feminine energy into themselves?
Yeah,
So it's not just about what they're losing, it's
Yeah.
also they're gaining something
that's the idea.
for the feminine.
Yeah, it actually comes back to Nikki's point here earlier. Chrissy, sorry. Need some more ching. What was I saying? That comes back to Tantra. So, Tantric practices really fortify the Qing. They strengthen the Qing. And they build up a reserve or a battery, you might say, of Qing within our body, without having to dispel it and lose it. So the sex is still there, but there's not the loss of Qing. And during that act, there is an exchange of energy between the masculine and the feminine. So that it's not just that the masculine is expanding and the feminine is gaining in that sense, but it's also the other way around. And my understanding is that when this is mastered, then the masculine actually has much more to gain. When he has control over his own kind of ejaculatory nature, you might say, his tendency to want to have just sex in that kind of animal way, and you can control that mechanism, then you can actually gain from the feminine. So that's, yeah.
I think that you've been mostly talking about how the Qing gets lost, but
Yeah.
is there a way for how it can get gained? Or is there a finite
Well, it's
amount in each?
No, it's not a finite amount. It's actually created all of the time by all of the organs in the body from Qi.
So it's a byproduct of Qi.
Yeah, it's created from Qi, universal Qi that's absorbed here into the hara, that's distributed through all the organs, through the meridians. The organ Qi, every organ then contributes its organ Qi to the testes or the ovaries for the creation of Qing. It's rain. Yeah, it's lightning out the back there. Oh, a bit of thunder. Yeah. So, yeah, it's not like you have a finite amount of this. It's constantly having to be manufactured and at high cost. Because like I said, up to 40% of our Qi or life force energy is converted into this one commodity. Okay? Yeah. It can be strengthened, it can be fortified, it can be contained, obviously, through things like celibacy, so it can be built up, but it is constantly being produced. Yeah. And the more you have, the healthier you are, basically. It's a general rule of thumb.
So isn't that what Tai Chi, Qigong,
Yep, that's exactly it. So,
that
yeah.
Qi and it's
Yeah.
strengthening.
It's strengthening this Qing. Yeah. And the next one, which we'll do now, Jing. Very important. Jing, you do have a finite amount of. Jing, it is again closer to physical reality. This really, when this is released, it does give you that intense feeling of orgasm in the body. So massive amounts of Jing are released during orgasm. It's also burnt up in the same way as Qing, through stress and through drug use. Like this. But you do have a finite amount of Jing, whereas Qing is constantly being manufactured. Jing is only absorbed during the first trimester of pregnancy. There's a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of Jing in the sperm and a tiny amount in the egg. And when there is a fusion of sperm and egg, that tiny amount draws from the huge reservoir at the centre of the earth, Jing, pulls it out of the earth. It can only do this for 3 months, and then that door closes. That reservoir of Jing in the body is stored in the kidneys. It's also known as kidney Qi, I believe. Once it's been drawn out of the earth, and we have it in our kidneys, after about 3 months of pregnancy, that's it. That's for your whole life. When this starts to get depleted, you get very ill. You get sick. You have all sorts of conditions. Old age comes on fast. When it's completely depleted, you die. That's how critical it is. And yet it is expended every time we have an orgasm, unfortunately. Huge amounts of it, yeah. Yeah. So we have to be careful. Again, this is an energy or a force that can be strengthened. It can be fortified through Tai Chi, Qigong, and the martial arts in particular, work with Jing. And in a way, it's a very dense form of chi that holds our physicality, our physical structures together. Some have even referred to this as DNA chi. It gives us because it's close to physicality, it's closer than the other two, so it nourishes profoundly, and it holds our structure intact. So we're very vital, we're energized, and we have the structure that we're designed to have according to our blueprint. If it's depleted in the womb, then there's all sorts of deformities and problems with the fetus that's developing, because it doesn't have the energy to form the correct structures in the correct way.
Does that happen if the mother is using drugs or something?
I'm not sure about that. I wouldn't know. Yeah. Drugs would deplete Jing. Yeah, they do.
What did you say again about? Did you say something about blueprint? I missed that last.
Jing, yeah, it's kind of holds us together. It allows for the blueprint to be expressed into physical form. It's very close to the vibration of physical reality. So it gives us our structure. It's my understanding of it.
So when you say using drugs,
Yes.
what do you mean by drugs? Because plants, a lot of the shamanic cultures, which
Yes.
people who worship the feminine,
Yes.
use plants,
Yes.
which a lot of people kind of would say they're not drugs.
Sure.
Plants, they're
Yeah.
essential plants.
Yeah.
So, what do you mean when you say
Well, pharmaceutical drugs for one,
Yeah.
recreational drugs particularly, yeah. Psychotropics, I assume you're talking about there, things like ayahuasca and such like. Yeah. My understanding is it does actually take a small amount of gin. Yeah, it's not a free ride. If you notice, sometimes you can feel quite drained or quite tired after these experiences. I mean, the experiences themselves can be very tiring because they can be intense. But it does draw life force energy from the body in order to open those doors and those gateways of consciousness.
Because it's a natural.
Yeah. Well, sex is natural as well. But yeah, you see what I'm saying, though. It does require energy. Yeah. So there is some loss there. But my feeling is around that is that the ancient ways, particularly the shamanic ways, perhaps it's not as profound as, say, through drug abuse or maybe through the use of some pharmaceuticals and things like that.
Yeah, because they wouldn't necessarily use it all the time.
No, you don't do it all the time, no. No, yeah. Whereas some drugs, some people are on it all the time, aren't they, for medication reasons, or even if you have mental health issues, you're on a certain type of medication. So apparently all those kind of drugs do draw on these energies. They draw on the life force energy.
So in a way, it's just like a vicious circle, and so it's depleting.
Life,
Is this kind of
Yeah.
You'd have it.
Yeah. It is, yeah, in a way.
But if it's depleting the Qing and the Jing, then you're not really going to get better, are you?
You're not going to get better.
Some downhill.
Well, yes. I mean, there's a question of degree. I mean, you're always going to deplete Qing and Jing as you're going through your life.
But you said that particularly depletes it. Habitual drugs.
Oh, yes. Yeah. You can see, I mean, people that are habitually addicted to drugs and, they get completely...
Medical drugs, yeah.
Oh, and medical drugs as well.
Medical
Well,
situation.
yeah, to various degrees, I would say that would be true. But it's a question of degree again.
Yeah.
Every drug would have its, distinct level that it would draw that energy. Yeah.
Isn't it the case that some drugs, anything that's brought into the body to create balance, if there's a deficiency, for example,
Yeah.
couldn't they be replicating natural sort of stuff that's going on in the body?
Yeah.
I mean, shall we not vilify them completely?
Oh,
I
no.
think we need to.
I'm just saying it draws on that battery of energy for them to have effect. It draws on life force energy, basically.
Which you can actually enhance by some of the going
Yes.
through some Tai Chi and then having your astral.
Yeah, but most of them. Or working on the Tai Chi and drawing the Chi. The Jing you can't, unfortunately, you can only strengthen it and fortify it. But you have a limited amount of Jing and you can't then replace that once it's lost.
Okay, I get this picture. There's an advert about two toys. One's got Duracell in, and
Yeah.
banging little drums. going around like this.
Yeah.
And it's lots more than really.
Yeah, and the other one's rechargeable batteries.
Yeah.
Yeah. So most of this is replenishable, it's rechargeable, as long as we live a proper lifestyle, eat proper food, do the proper thing, don't burn ourselves out, basically. But Jing is something that you only have a finite amount in any life, and once that's gone, you're dead.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Party on.
Yes. Exactly. Yes, Marcus. Yeah.
So, just a summation of the map. Are you sort of
Yes.
bringing the Vedas specifically? Or, I noticed you mixing Chinese.
Yeah, it's mostly Chinese. This. Yeah. Yes. I'm trying to race through this section to get to the Vedic side of things.
We started off with the Vedas, now into the Chinese thing. Are they merging at all in any way?
Well, my understanding of this, when I looked into this intuitively within myself, is I saw that actually these two streams at one time were one, and they divided several thousand years ago into these two separated cultures. One went with life force energy in the feminine, which was the water culture of the Qi, the Chinese, and the other went with fire and consciousness, which was the yogic Vedic culture. So, wow. Talking of water.
Where's the Western minds come from that analogy? Just to make things difficult.
Yes. Well, the Western mind, I think, is a hodgepodge, isn't it? It's a collection of all kinds of different things over thousands of years. Yeah, melting pot, really. Yeah.
Quite a lot of repression too.
That's your impression too?
Repression.
Oh, repression as well. Yes. Well, the same as in China and India. There's repression.
Of the history.
Huh?
Looking back over history,
Yes.
if we look at our particular religious organisation,
Yes.
but actually it's all a bit tight, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
not much room for expression.
No. Well, the way I see it is it's an expression of time.
Right.
Because you have the ancient cultures like the Indian and the Chinese cultures that go back before a period in time which in the Vedas they call the Kali Yuga. Have you all heard of this? Do we know about the cycles of time? So you're going back beyond the Kali Yuga. You're going into a time where human beings had the ability to directly perceive these energies, to see them, and to work with them directly. At this time, we're more or less at this level where we can understand them and intellectualize about them, and then we have to develop a sensitivity towards them over time. We have to cultivate that. But back then, that was normal. They could perceive their chakras, for example. They could perceive the Sushumna, the energies running up their body through their meridians. They could perceive these different levels of the chi force within them. They could see it and taste it and experience it. That's how they knew about it. That's where those writings and that information comes from. What's happened in the West, more or less, as those cultures have gone into decline and gone into forgetfulness, the Western culture has begun, which is the beginning of writing, and the written word, and the spoken language, and all of that, which was around about 3100 BC. All of this started with the Sumerian culture coming into the Egyptian cultures, and the Grecian cultures, and then into the Western culture. So these cultures were really founded in a time when we didn't have a clue, because we were moving then into the dark age of the Kali Yuga, and through the Kali Yuga to where we are now, which is more the age of enlightenment, or the beginning of that time. So, in a way, what we're talking about here precedes Western understanding. It precedes our knowledge here in the West. And it's one of the reasons why I love ancient knowledge, because of that direct perceptual faculty that the ancients had, particularly the Indians. They were just amazing. You know, they could travel through time, they could travel through space, they could glimpse into other dimensions and realities like we can just walking down the street, and that was like normal for them. Going back to Treta Yuga, going back to the Satya Yuga. I mean, you go back a long way in time now, but they had those faculties and those abilities back then. But they were in a period of decline, where their natural talent and abilities were being eroded by time, and eventually those civilizations and those cultures were lost, and those abilities within us were lost. And then we hit the Dark Age, and then we're coming out of that now into a remembrance and into an awareness of what was, again, as we are in the ascending arc through time. I do a talk on this. It's called Time and Consciousness. It's really interesting.
So you're calling this the spiritual incarnation. This is the rise of
Yes.
the spiritual.
We're moving into another era now called the Dwapara Yuga, out of this Kali Yuga, which is the age of darkness, into an age of energy and energy consciousness. Yeah. Anyway, that's for another talk. It's a talk I'd love to do. It's just amazing because we can look at history. We can see everything and how it fits into this cycle of time, because time is cyclic, not linear. It's like seasonal, and consciousness follows that, or rather the other way around. Time follows consciousness. But we'll get into this another time. Not now. Yeah. But in answer to Marcus's question, the way I see Western cultures is it came out of this forgetful period, this dark period in human history. Whereas this, and the Vedas, is a time when there was much more illumination and light and perception as to the reality of who we really are. Last, energy. And then we're going to look at the masculine, because we have to, otherwise we'll be here all night.
So the Vedas do talk about the Jing and the Qing.
Yes.
Or
Oh, yes.
in the same way.
The same way, yeah. But they have more of a slant towards the fire or consciousness aspect, Shiva, which we're going to get to after this side of things, after the fertile chaos. Yeah.
So are there equivalent words for these Qing and Jing and Qi? What pranas is
And our prana's not chi.
No. So what are the Vedic words for these things?
I don't know what that is. Yeah, I haven't unlocked that yet. Yeah. It is there, yeah, but I don't know what that is. But it's not the Nadi system, because some confuse the Nadi system with the meridian system, and people confuse prana with chi. And we'll get to that in a little while, because they're not the same. Yeah. Kundalini. Just thought I'd say that. It's like the sound of it. It rolls off the tongue. Okay, this most mysterious and mystical of forces. It's also feminine. And I think we all know this force because it's also associated with reproduction. In its dormant state, it's responsible for the cycles of reproduction. This is a force, really, that has to keep moving. It's not a force that's created inside of the human body. It's not a force that can be stored within the human body. It's a force that has to move. However, having said all of that, there is a reservoir of Kundalini at the base of all of us. We have this as a potential, we might say. And literally this means, it's a Sanskrit term, so this is going over to the Vedic side now a little bit. This literally means serpent fire. Who hasn't heard of this? Kundalini. Yeah? You haven't heard of Kundalini? Okay. No. So this force, this Kundalini force, is often depicted as snakes, or a snake. Quite often you see it on a staff as two snakes. Have you seen that? Yeah. So this is the serpent fire, or the serpent energy. And it's dormant within all of us as human beings. What this serpent fire is really hard to define. But I'm going to have a jolly good go. Yes. It brings us all the way back to the beginning, where we were talking about God and we were talking about Shakti. And really, if we look towards what is at the core of the earth, we'll see that there is an iron core. I think science has more or less said basically at the middle of the earth there's this iron core. It's revolving, because we know that because it creates a magnetic field. Yeah? That core is a gateway to what I would call the undifferentiated female energy. So this is the oneness of consciousness that we're all aspiring to with the Advaita school and all of that. Kundalini is the oneness of Shakti energy. It's the oneness of the feminine energy. The exact flip side of the masculine consciousness oneness energy. Fertile chaos, in other words. Yeah. So this is an energy that hasn't been moulded. It hasn't been touched by the masculine. The masculine hasn't created anything out of this. But it's an energy which is fertile, but in a chaotic state, ready to be imprinted. And I think in quantum physics, they call this the quantum flux. Now, I've been getting into quantum physics lately. It's a fascinating subject. And they make some really outrageous claims about the nature of reality. It blows your mind, really. Because my understanding of this is that reality is totally perceptual, and that we're creating it every moment by our perception of it. So there's this fertile chaos or quantum flux that when consciousness meets it, suddenly becomes a chair, a door, a floor, all the familiar that we're used to.
But we all have a similar consciousness, because we all identify that thing.
That chair, yeah. Well, there's two arguments to that. The one is that none of you exist, and only I'm here, and I'm creating all of you. Okay, and you're probably doing the same to me. Or that we have a collective of consciousness where we have kind of like agreements in place that we're going to create a collective reality that we can all partake in, which I feel is more like.
So if I ask you for a glass of water,
Yes.
you're going to know what it is.
Yes, of course, yeah. So this is more the level of the subconscious, that then that would be creating this at the collective level of our collective joint experience. Yeah? But it's still the same. Reality is being created as we perceive it. The perceiver is not separate from the creation itself, which is what we're talking about here. This is quantum physics. And if you look at something, it's not there anymore. And as soon as you look at it, it's there. Yeah. I was looking at something there called refresh rates. There's this place in London, what's it called now, where they do all the time calculations, Greenwich. And they have there something called the atomic clock. The atomic clock basically is this clock that gives out a frequency on the decay of, I think it's cesium, it's a radioactive matter. Something in the region of 80 millionths of a second, I think they can count down to. So we know that this quantum flux is created at least 80 millionths of a second, every 80 millionths of a second. And when you think our eyes are actually perceiving it 24 frames a second, just how slow we are compared to how quick and how fluid and how instantaneous this reality really is. Quite amazing. But that brings me back to Kundalini, because really this is the substrate, or the very substance that everything is really created from. And it's the primary creative, fertile substance of the universe. And we as human beings also have this within us. In fact, there are two forms of Kundalini. There's the earth Kundalini and there's the human Kundalini. And they are both connected at our root.
So is it more basic than the chi?
I would say more refined and basic, yeah.
Elemental than the
Chi would maybe be a creation out of this further up the hierarchy, I would say.
Okay. So
Yeah,
we just
and
flip
more-
this over.
Yeah, I've left it till last because it leads into the next section.
Right.
Yes. Where are we going next? Yeah. Yeah. You could do this any way around you like, really. Yeah.
So is it like an electromagnetic connection? When you say we're connected, the earth and humans?
Yes, I was just about to get into that. Yes, exactly. It's the root chakra that connects to the earth Kundalini. And each and every one of us, our root chakras are not pointing out, as it's often depicted. The Muladhara chakra, which is the root of us, is pointing towards the centre of the earth. And it's the middle of that chakra runs a channel called the Sushumna that then connects with the centre of the earth. And that's what gives us our sense of being earthlings, our sense of being grounded here, is this rooted connection. But nothing happens to the chi, nothing happens to that Kundalini energy until the Muladhara chakra is open and clear.
So you can't receive the energy from the earth?
Until that's clear. Yeah. So we have to clean our root chakra in order that we can activate our own Kundalini, because the earth energy will then activate our system in turn. But that won't happen until that chakra is clear.
Okay. What about when you go barefoot? Are you not receiving that energy?
Oh, you are? Yes. Oh, you are.
But just not.
But you're not activating Kundalini.
No.
Yeah. If you were to activate Kundalini, you'd have profound transformations in your body. I mean, not just metaphysical, but also physical transformations. It would transform your consciousness to one of an enlightened state, almost instantly.
What I mean is, can you receive that energy without being barefoot?
Yeah, I think you can. Because I think it comes directly from the chakra.
And how do you clear that chakra?
Well, that chakra is all to do with survival issues. So these first two chakras here, the Muladhara chakra and the second chakra here, is all to do with the mother and the child. Particularly the second chakra is all to do with our nurturance. Yeah? But this first chakra is our survival issue. So I think most of us, myself included, unfortunately, we have survival issues. You know, issues around money, issues around our well-being, issues about how we're going to be provided for, how we're going to be supported, how we're going to be looked after, how we're going to be taken care of. You know, all these issues which are to do with our root. Once we work with those issues and we clear those issues, then we know absolutely within our heart of hearts that we are loved, we are cherished, and we are nurtured without a shadow of a doubt. We feel it and we know it and we live it. And nature and the law of attraction will respond to that feeling within us and provide us with everything. It's how they lived in previous yugas. They didn't have to work like we have to work, you know, paying bills and all this kind of stuff. You know, they just had a natural nurturance that it came to them from the earth, spontaneously. You read in the scriptures of previous times how the earth was overflowing with vegetables and fruits and grains and all kinds of animals and creatures, much more so than it is today, that nature was providing in abundance previous to the time of agriculture.
So it's not so much a matter of belief as it is a matter of awareness.
It is. Yeah, it's a clearing process. We have to clear that centre in order that our Kundalini then can be activated by the Earth Kundalini. And then our Kundalini then arises within us. And really that is the journey of the feminine, Shakti, moving up towards the masculine. We'll get to this in a little while because they meet at the human level, obviously.
And is that what happens when you cleared out the basement?
Yes. Yes. When we clear out the shadows, when we clear out our... We're going to get to samskaras, yeah, before 9 o'clock. When we clear out all that shadow, dark stuff, you might say, the non-self, then we can actually allow for the self to shine through.
So, within
Yes,
the Vedic teachings then, is there a formula that's, or Sanskrit chanting or practices that you can use to assist you to clear that chakra?
Yes, there absolutely are. Yeah. A lot of these rely on, on yoga. There are certain yoga postures which work specifically on the Muladhara chakra. Right now I'm actually doing a form of mantra meditation which works on that. Sound vibration is very powerful in terms of clearing that. Pranayama, highly recommended in terms of clearing not just the root chakra but all of the chakras, but particularly the root. That's where we start. That's survival issues. So pranayama, very, very important for that. And then, of course, meditation, which is called dhyana in Sanskrit, which is the focused stillness. Will also clean that. What we're clearing from that is something called samskaras, which I'm going to get into next. We haven't arrived there yet. So we're just dealing with the feminine aspect here. But we will get to samskaras and how to clear them in a little while. Okay? So just bear with us. If I haven't answered your question by the end of the talk, remind me. Yeah? Okay. So the Kundalini energy, the serpent fire, basically rises up the spine. It rises up a particular channel in the spine called the Sushumna. And situated on this Sushumna are two other serpents, you might say, which are called Ida and Pingala. I'm going through this very quickly. Where they cross, you have what's called a chakra. Now the chakras are not the whizzing discs that we think they are. The chakras are actually little gateways inside this spinal nerve, inside the Sushumna. And what happens at birth is that your consciousness comes down into this tube, into this Sushumna channel, towards Kundalini, because it's attracted to the feminine. And these gateways act like trapdoors. And they close behind us. So it's like tunk, 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 tunk. And then we're right down in the root as a baby, developing our physical body. First chakra. Can you see? The whole process of enlightenment, or the whole process of self-realization, is the clearing of these centers of samskaras, which we'll get into next, and the bringing back up of consciousness. which in this form, at the moment as we're looking at this, takes the form of Kundalini, because the Kundalini feminine force that rises. If that rises prematurely, you'll have an enormous amount of shadow or enormous amount of trauma to have to deal with very quickly, which for most people will tip them into some kind of mental disorder, insanity or psychosis. So that's how powerful this force is, because it can literally release all the shadow components within our subtle anatomy, within our subtle body, particularly in our chakras. That's where it tends to accrue. It's a bit like garbage bins. It tends to get stuck there. So with Kundalini rising, a lot of this is broken up, it's illuminated, it's felt, and it can be overwhelming. So this is something that actually we need to take great care and great respect around. Okay? Yeah, let's not go into that too much now, because that's for another talk. There's another talk to do with chakras and Kundalini and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to do that now. That's just a summary. Are we all okay on that? Yeah? We're going to move to the next section. We're going to have a 5-minute break. Okay, we'll go to water or whatever. And then we're going to deal with the masculine side. Okay? So 5 minutes and then we'll start again. I think we're starting. Alright, yeah, so the whole point and the whole essence of this, and you probably gather from the title of the talk, Spiritual Incarnation, the idea is that really most of us is really not here. Most of us is not incarnate. So the idea behind the ancient teachings is to incarnate the higher aspects of our nature. Really what we would call the masculine aspects into the feminine. This is that relationship really between masculine and feminine. It's the beloved within us. But to do that we have to go through this alchemical process in terms of our energy, which is the feminine side. Because this vessel has to be clean, it has to be clear, particularly the central nervous system has to be free of trauma and pain and all those things that impinge upon it which are of the nature of shadow, in order that this vessel can be open and can receive, you might say, the Holy Spirit or the God force, and it can live in here as much as like a temple. But most of us are full of hurts and wounds and pains that we carry with us. We're full of toxins, we have poor lifestyles or poor diets, and these things really don't allow for this cultivation of what we call inner alchemy, the transformation of our physical life by opening our physical body to higher aspects coming in and incarnating. And that does require a work, really, with the forces that we've described so far in terms of the feminine energy. That's the energy side of the equation, and that is Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, all work with energy, the feminine side. Pranayama is all to do with energy, the feminine side. The only side that's masculine is stillness. But it's the hardest part for all of us is the stillness. And that's why in the practices that I teach around this is that we do all the preparation in terms of the Shakti that then prepares the nervous system and the body to enter into stillness more readily, more easily, more deeply and more profoundly. But you have to do the energy work first and then the stillness comes. If we just go from our busy, busy day, our busy life, and we just sit there and we think we're just going to be still instantly, very, very hard. The mind's so active. There's a process that takes it to stillness. And that's this process that we've been doing in Norway that I'd like to introduce here in Tomnes, if anybody's interested. Yeah, but it won't be now. It will be probably in late November or December.
What's it like?
Huh?
How do you do it?
The practices?
Yeah, the practices.
Usually it's a little bit of spinal work with some Tai Chi or some very gentle yoga postures or combinations. And then we do something called spinal breathing pranayama, where we sit and we actually draw the breath and our mind up and down the spine. 14 breaths usually. It takes about 10 minutes. And then from there we go into the meditation, the stillness, which is a silent mantra. Not TM. It's another thing. Yeah. And I'm also introducing into this because of my practices right now with mantras. I'm finding the whole world of sound and the effect of sound really incredible. It's primordial. In the beginning was the word. The first thing that ever came into creation was vibration, sound. So I'm getting back into looking at mantras now, which is where I was when I was a monk, with mantra meditation. So I want to introduce that into it, but I haven't quite formulated yet how I'm going to do that. But there are a few key mantras that I want to introduce, and these are called bija mantras. They're taken directly from what's known as the Devi Bhagavatam. And these are root sounds for particular archetypes of consciousness. They're really amazing. You want me to demonstrate? Okay, we're still in the Shakti area of this, you understand? We haven't moved over to the masculine side yet. We'll have to do that as a talk another day. So on the feminine side, the bija mantras, the one that we're most familiar with is for the Ajna Center here, which is Om. We all know Om. There is another mantra that I'm using right now, which is associated with the, well, in India they call the goddess of fortune, which is the goddess Lakshmi, which is Shreem. 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 Yeah. There is a mantra or a sound. It's just one word. Actually, all the bija mantras are single syllables, and they're actually forming the vowels of the Sanskrit language. That's where the vowels came from these early archetypal vibrations in nature.
How many archetypal consciousnesses are there?
50 in the Sanskrit language. 50, yeah. But not all vowels, you have consonants as well. Another one is Hrim. Hrim. Then we have, for the law of attraction, and for people that are into that, we have Klim. Ganapati has his own. It's called Gum. Yeah. Mover of obstacles. Kali or Durga is Dum. So you just Dum. Dum. But you also usually say it as part of a sequence. For example, the Lakshmi mantra is Om Shrim Mahalakshmiye Svaha. So you would chant Om Shrim Mahalakshmiye Svaha. For Sarasvati, it's Aim. That's the bija sound for that archetype, which is to do with learning and communication. Aim. And her mantra is Om Aim Sarasvatiye Svaha. You hear these chanted in India, it's just Om Aim Sarasvatiye Svaha. So that invokes the force of that archetype within our own consciousness, brings it forward, because it's all within us. It's just a case of cultivating it. And sound is one of the most powerful ways to do that, and particularly the bija sounds.
What's the healing archetype?
Danvanti. So it would be Sri Danvanti Namaha, Sri Danvanti Namaha. And I have used another healing archetype, which is Hiranyagarbha. So I've used Om Shrim Hiranyagarbhaye Swaha, Om Shrim Hiranyagarbhaye Swaha, Om Shrim Hiranyagarbhaye Swaha. And normally you would chant these on beads, 108 times. I don't know if you can feel the effect of that as I'm chanting it. But if you're open to feeling energies, you'll notice how even just playing with it, as we are doing now, how it has a powerful effect on the energy body. Yeah. But on Danvanti, I can give you these mantras later if you like. I can write them down for you. Yeah.
When you're in, I mean, I know when I used to go to the temple and everyone's chanting Hare Krishna, even if you don't say it yourself, you get into this altered state.
Yeah, you get into altered state.
By people chanting that, and it's this whole thing.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of people do.
Yeah. And then, well, eventually the mantra becomes automatic. So if you chant it for long enough, they say at least 15 minutes or 20 minutes, when you stop, you find your brain still doing it. And that's supposed to be the ideal state. Yeah. Anyway, this is not about mantras today, although that is part of what I want to introduce. You're out there, Mike. Do you want some more water?
Actually, yeah.
Yeah. Let's crack on. I think we've only got half an hour officially left to do the masculine.
Solid knees.
Yeah.
Less than that.
We're simple blokes, aren't we, really?
3 minutes for that.
I know. Alright, so what happens with the masculine? Masculine is on high, and the masculine energy descends. So in Sanskrit this would be known as Shiva, whereas the feminine, as I said to you earlier, would be known as Shakti. So, at the very beginning we have, you could say, the masculine principle or the masculine energy, which is no movement, no light, no sound, no form, nothing. And then there's an impulse. No one has ever told me how that arises yet, but there's an impulse within the void, you might say, which is the Absolute or God, to create and to know himself. We're going to look at the masculine side now. So the first thing that happens is light. So when the masculine energy or consciousness moves, it creates light. It's the first thing. And it's in the Bible. Let there be light. Yeah? So this is the very, very start of the movement of the masculine energy, right at the very beginning. Feminine energy is most dense and most profound here down at the root. As feminine energy moves up through the different dimensions and through the different realms, it gets, you might say, diluted. Finer and finer and finer and finer. By the time it meets the masculine, as it's beginning its journey, as at its most subtlest. Very, very, very fine, subtle feminine energy at the highest levels. But just enough to create something called the light body. Now we've all heard of this light body. It's also known as the Merkaba. I think we're familiar with this term. Who hasn't heard of Merkaba?
No.
Arabic.
No wonder.
Yeah. It's basically our light body. It's the highest aspect of our higher nature, is this Merkaba. It's one of the first things that we create in terms of masculine consciousness, because when masculine consciousness creates, it creates initially geometry. And there is a whole science associated with this called sacred geometry, because the masculine is responsible for seeding and moulding the feminine. So the universe and the whole of feminine energy is based on sacred geometry, because it comes from the masculine consciousness. Can you see? You get things like the flower of life and all that kind of stuff. Yes?
Isn't there a William Blake picture of this, with the chap, the long beard and everything, bending over with a pair of dividers?
Yeah,
measuring.
that's right.
Yeah.
There is. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's the masculine that longs to mould or imprint or impress the feminine. And it's the feminine that yearns to be moulded or imprinted. You see the same things plays out in men and women, in ordinary human life. But, this is at a more pure, rarefied state. Consciousness and energy. Not just creating humans and babies, but creating universes and galaxies. Planets. And all the life forms on the planets. They're all created out of templates of masculine consciousness. It's the seed principle. But it starts at the highest level. So, this high level is in theosophy, and I'm going to mix in some theosophy here as well. I'm sorry. Along with the Vedic stuff, because they go together very well. Is called the Adi plane, where Adi in Sanskrit means the first, or the logic, or the logos, which in this system is the sun. This is the ultimate masculine principle. You might say that's the source of light. Can you see? In terms of physical reality. So at that level, we basically descend and we create various structures. This is where the chakras come in. This is where the column comes in. This is where the Merkaba is created. These structures then are templated into reality, into the feminine, as we come down, because the masculine descends. So at every level of that descent, those structures are impressed into reality. So even in the physical body, we have chakras. This is our plexus. Nervous plexus and endocrine glands correspond with the chakras of the etheric body, correspond with the chakras of the astral body, the mental body, the causal body. Can you see? Going on that. So basically what happens here is that the energy here is very, very fast, very rapid. But down here it's like you've got the core of the earth, you've got this iron ball. So it's very dense and very heavy. And as you move higher up, it gets lighter, more refined, more light. Yeah? So, we're going to start at the top, and that's the Adi plane, or the logic consciousness, which we all are. We all are that. But at that level, there's not much distinction. There's not much in the way of feminine energy for God to say, actually, this is me. This is a reflection. This is how I can learn about myself. Because mostly at this level, it's still mostly masculine. So it's much like being in the void, except perhaps you're a white spark floating in a white space of light. In Sanskrit, they call this the Brahma Jyoti. The Brahma Jyoti. It literally means the light of spirit. And we always associate spirit with light, right? So this Brahma Jyoti basically is filled, according to the Vedas, with individual spirit sparks, like individual atoms that are all illuminating light. And together they create this realm of light. But as you could imagine, if you were just an atom of light floating in a light space, it'd be very hard to define what you are still. Can you see? How would you know? Because there's nothing there to compare yourself with. Because everything else is white and light. And a lot of Babas and a lot of yogis, particularly what's called the Jnana yogis in India, they have an aspiration to merge with this Brahma Jyoti, which is the equivalent of the oneness movement, or the merging with the one of spirit that we have in our idea of that in the West, taken from the East, of course. Yeah. However, the masculine wants to meet up with the feminine. It wants to go on this journey of discovery, because God wants to know himself. So to do that, he's got to go down. So he's got to drop in energy to the next level. Now that's impossible. He can't do that. So what he does is he sends an aspect or a fragment of himself. So this is like a spark of a spark to the next level down. It's a tiny aspect. And these light energies are known as rays. Ray energies, of which there are 7. I'm going to get into this in another talk to do with the ray energies. The 7 angels that stood before the throne of God. I think he mentions this in the Bible and all of that. These are the master creators in the universe, these 7 rays. But we'll just call it light for now, and sparks, because it's easier. Okay. So then there's a manifestation of one of these rays into the next level down, which is the monadic plane. From there it drops down again into the, if I remember rightly, it's the nirvanic plane. Let me just check. Yes, nirvanic. From there it drops down again into what's called the Buddhic. And there it kind of stops. So we're dropping down each time an aspect of ourself. These are called seed atoms, and this is the more complicated version, so I don't want to lose you, because the way I used to do this is I used to say, actually what we have here is a very high frequency, and then we just jump down, jump down, jump down, each time becoming more and more dense, more and more heavy, as we mix with the feminine energies, which are heaviest down here, but lightest up here. But we're going down towards the feminine energies, so the realms are actually becoming more feminized as we go down. Can you see? More heavy, more structure, more form, more bodies. Yeah, like that. So we're coming down, down, down. At this level, we have our, what you might call aspect which is to do with the use of our will, our intention. And then at this level, we have, I believe it's, I believe that's to do with divine love. And then down to this level, which is life itself, life force energy. So we have what's called a triple nature, a triune nature of life, wisdom, and love. Life, wisdom, and love. So we have will, we have love, and wisdom, this Buddhi.
So that would be the Trinity, maybe?
Yeah, the Holy Trinity. It's the Holy Trinity, yeah, because there's another Trinity which comes next. So we have these 3 aspects of us. These are the higher levels. This is what we call in the New Age, or in most places, we call this the higher self. Yeah. This is the higher self. It's made up of wisdom, it's made up of love, and life, and light. It's a higher nature. Now this higher nature still needs to go further down. It needs to go further down towards matter.
So is that what you call the noble self in your house?
Noble self, yeah. Noble self. So what it does is it extends down into the next level, which is what's called in Sanskrit manas, or mind. That then goes down to the next level, which is called astral. This is emotion. And then it goes down to the next level, which is the etheric, which we already have, and physical. So we have light here, which is on high, coming down, densifying, 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 all the way down, actually to this point here. Because if you remember, the etheric world is chi, and it's part of the feminine. So it goes as far as the astral and no further. That's as far as the masculine consciousness drops. And then something very, very unusual happens at the level of the astral level. See, at these upper places, we are light. So light, basically, is our true nature. We are our true selves. But when we get down to the astral, this level of light can become imprinted from the physical reality. This level of the astral can actually take impressions from the physical world. That distorts or contaminates this region of light and then blocks us off from accessing what is above. It operates like a screen or a filter on our consciousness. So we're down here in physical reality, but what we're experiencing down here is impressed or imprinted into the astral world. In fact, the astral world is just an imprinted reality. And each and every one of us has our own version of this.
So that would be the feminine imprinting on the masculine.
Yes, printed into masculine consciousness, exactly right. Yeah. So these create structures, because at this point light is very dense, light is very heavy, light is able to hold those imprints. And for the first time we experience that which we are not. These imprints are called samskaras, which literally means emotional scars or emotional wounds. And I'm going to tell you a little story now as to how this happens. And you'll get a clear idea of how samskaras are actually created, what their role and what their function are, and then how we can dismantle them. It is the samskaras which really cause us to forget. It's the samskaras which has created this veil on our consciousness. Because here we are light and we are just ourselves. But here it all changes. And what changes is birth. We take birth. We decide at the soul level to send down a spark of ourself from our higher nature into physical nature to experience this reality. When we do that, we take birth in the physical universe as a little baby. We all know that. That's how our journey always starts, as a baby, right? So as we come into this world, we're more or less clean. The astral is a bright, clean, clear place. Apart from some astrological influences which are resident within the astral world, and some old wounds and some scars that we bring over maybe from a previous life which are dormant. For the most part, babies are clear. And if you look at a baby and you hold a baby, there's that sweetness, there's that love, there's that innocence that just comes through the body, through the energy field and through the eyes of that little baby. We can all feel it and we all are endeared by it. And babies are lovely for that reason. But what happens as soon as we come into the physical world is that imprinting starts straight away. Because the mechanism for imprinting into the astral is through our senses and our sensory awareness. So as soon as we're born, we have a central nervous system that then starts to create samskaras in our astral field immediately. The first thing is all the chaos, the bright lights, the change of temperature, and the smack on the bottom. Just to get the whole thing going. Next is a huge shock. We have an umbilicus, our life source is ripped away from us. Our connection to the mother is ripped away. And we're feeling like we're just completely cast out and abandoned from heaven. So suddenly within the consciousness of that very small little baby, within the first few seconds, is the feeling of being cast out from heaven, of having fallen, of having been separated. Yeah, the feelings of sorrow and sadness and grief and pain and the agony and the anguish which is going on around all of that at the moment of birth creates the first imprints into this astral, the first samskaras. And these are our core samskaras. Our core samskaras. They are the very first ones. Every other samskara or emotional wound or hurt that we experience along the way is usually built up on these first primal samskaras, going all the way back to our birth. All the way back. So once we come into the world and we start to experience things, then we start to receive impressions through our senses, and that's all relayed to the astral. Every single impression is relayed here. So eventually what happens here is it starts to get very busy. There is a mixture of experiences that we all have here in physical reality from day one, because we enter into a polarized universe where we have good and we have bad. As those experiences start to build up in the astral plane, that little infant, that soul, starts to separate from any memory or any feeling or any connection to the higher forces. Can you see? It starts now to relate to itself through this astral membrane. It starts to see itself through its samskaras. In other words, through its wounds and through its hurts. And this is what you would call a personality. It's an ego. Because it defines the non-self. Can you see? In psychology, you would call it the subconscious. This is the subconscious. This is how it's created, through imprints. Whenever we go into the basement, and the work that I do to clear that, we're really looking at clearing samskaras in our field, in our astral field. And the astral is made of samskaras, like a house is made of bricks. Eventually, through our experience, through getting knocked about in life, and through being impacted with shock and trauma and all kinds of experiences, we build up a huge layer of samskaras here in our astral field, in our astral energy, that eventually completely obliterates any light from the higher nature coming through. We are completely entombed and completely isolated, and we feel separate. Can you see?
Totally.
So, what happens when we clear all the...
Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment, Marcus. Yeah.
Sorry to...
No, that's okay. Yeah, that's okay. I'm trying to get there as quickly as I can before it gets too late. So I'm missing some bits here. But the key here really that I'm wanting to emphasize is this whole idea of samskara. And it's really the meeting of the feminine and the masculine. Because it's only when we're born into the etheric physical that the astral is impacted and impressed by our experience here on earth. Can you see that? So this is the alchemical process going on inside each and every one of us. By the time we get to our age, and some of us are younger than me here, and some of us are too older maybe, but by the time we get a little bit older, we're completely samskaras. Totally, yeah. And it is said, and I have read, that collectively as a species on the planet right now, we are samskared to such a fever pitch that you would consider it to be a collective neurosis.
Yeah. And I wonder if it was
And some describe this as an insanity.
But we can see it, can't we?
Yeah.
We can
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah. So our view of ourself and our feeling for ourself is no longer pristine, lovely, light, unconditional love, wisdom, full of life energy, exuberance and all of that. That's a baby, that's a child, but very quickly the samskars build up and accumulate. And it's like an ocean, this. Because every experience, be it good or bad, is encoded in here. And it is said that modern psychology, in terms of what it does, in terms of clearing this, is like trying to clear the ocean with a teaspoon. Because even while you're trying to clear it, you're being samskared, impressed at the same time while you're looking at it. So it's just endless. It's endless. And in some respects, at this level, we are actually what I would call a mob. We think we are distinct and individual as a personality, as an ego. But each one of these little samskars operates independently from every other little samskar. So we have to ask the question, why do they exist in the first place? Why create samskars? Why does this mechanism exist? So it's an interesting question, because if you could actually get rid of that or stop that, then we would just be enlightened here on physical earth from birth and continue in the enlightened state for our entire life.
It's balance that keeps us here to learn and grow.
Yes, exactly. You got it. We learn and grow because it defines the non-self. We have to have a definition of the non-self because as a spark and an aspect of God, we have to embrace or experience that which is not in order that we can taste and experience that which we really are. It's a point of relativity inside of each and every one of us. So it has a function, it has a use. But what's happened, predominantly I would say more in the West than in the East, is that there is no kind of dismantling of the samskars. There's no clearing of them. There's no allowing for the light to eventually shine through. And when that does, we have the meeting of Shiva and Shakti. We have the meeting of Radha and Krishna on the inside. And that feels like divine love.
Is that the alchemical marriage?
That is it. That's it. It's where the Kundalini meets consciousness inside of us. That would be called the enlightened state. And that feels like love. So each and every one of us has this potential. But to do that, we have to clear these samskars. We have to clear these memories or these hurts or these wounds from our past, in order that we can then be clear in our body and in our nervous system, so that this consciousness can enter and we can be incarnate fully.
Is that what happens in your practices?
That's it. That's the idea. That's why the practice always has masculine and feminine components. You've got to have the illumination of the masculine consciousness and the energy work of the feminine. Most practices are either distinctly feminine or distinctly masculine in terms of their therapeutic use. So you have the talking therapies, for example, which is, reflective therapy, you might say, more masculine. It's about bringing consciousness to things. But then you've got body workers dealing with energy and, that are dealing with energy but not necessarily illuminating any patterns or any issues. So I don't know, the work I do is one of the few things that brings together the masculine and the feminine in one therapy, in one treatment. And that's the most powerful way forward. Not just in terms of therapy, but in terms of meditation and spiritual practices, as I was describing to Marcus. The practices we do have energy, Shakti components and masculine components built into them. So we do both sides at the same time. The analogy I like to use is one of a boat and a guy rowing a boat across a river. And he's stuck on this shore of the river, which is the earth, human existence. And he wants to get to the shore, which is heaven. Right? So he decides to get into his boat and he starts rowing. And this is basically what the yogis and the mystics do in India. They row and they row and they row and they have such a strong meditation that they can row all the way across that river through the force and the power of their consciousness. But what they're not noticing quite often, and I find this was missing for me when I was in the temple as well, is out of the back of the boat there are thousands of anchors. Some of them huge, some of them tiny, some of them quite medium in size. But they're all anchoring the boat to the ego, to the personality, to earthly existence. So no matter how hard you row, it's going to be very hard to get across that river with all those anchors luring you down and pinning you to the other shore, right? So the key process here really is one of lifting anchors and rowing at the same time. So lifting anchors is the feminine work, rowing is the masculine work, meditation. So we do both. And that's the fastest way to get to the other shore, for sure. Now you can do it, like the yogis do it, by actually meditating for hours and hours every day and committing absolutely decades of their life to just rowing. And dragging those anchors or snapping those anchors just through the force of their meditation and practice. But for most of us in the West, we don't have that ability or that time. So we have to engage in energy processes to lift the anchors as well as do a little bit of rowing. And that actually is a more integrated approach, which actually will get us back home faster, quicker, rather than working with just energy processes or consciousness processes separately. So this is what we try and do. So, let's go back to Marcus's question there just briefly, as we're out of time just about nearly. As we go through our life, we're constantly creating samskaras. And the nature of samskaras is dependent upon the intensity of the experience. The more intense the experience, the more deep the samskara. And that can happen at any time. But by far the most intense experiences are usually the first experiences in our life, although we can't remember them. The key to samskaras is noticing that, basically, or being aware of the fact that they are created really to protect us. It's like the emotional wound or the emotional memory becomes sealed off. This is called crystallization or encapsulation. So the memory or the hurt or the pain becomes encapsulated. That separates it from our consciousness. But what we've done is we've separated a small portion of our light body along with it. Can you remember, as we come down through the realms, all of this is light. This is who we are. The astral plane when we're born also is light. It's who we are. But it becomes imprinted. So that light actually becomes entombed. Can you see? So behind the shadow is the light. That's the resource. Yeah? Can you get it? Okay. So when a samskara is released and is cleaned, it actually restores back to us a tiny fragment of our true nature. A tiny fragment of our higher self, which has then become incarnate in physical reality.
Say that again, please. Say that.
When we finally clear a samskara and we release it, we actually restore to our consciousness an aspect of our higher nature. We incarnate a tiny portion of ourself into physical reality.
Okay. So that's the spiritual incarnation.
That's spiritual incarnation. And then a little bit of us is here with us on this journey.
Right.
Is that the same as soul retrieval?
Same as soul retrieval. Yeah, in the shamanic sense. Yeah, little fragments, aspects. These are all fragments, these are all aspects. Every samskara, you might say, has a consciousness of its own. Very, very simple. It has a basic emotional wound that it's trying to protect you from. That's all it is. One emotion, one hurt, one pain.
But it's a block to the light, too.
It is a block, yeah. It is a block. It's an aspect of the light that has become wounded, you might say. Yeah? Because you can only become samskared in a way by things that you're not conscious of. Can you see? Things that you're not conscious of are the nature of darkness, because there's no light, there's no consciousness. But it's you still. Until you become conscious, and then you illuminate that from within. That brings light, it brings consciousness.
It goes away.
Huh?
And then it goes away.
Then the darkness goes away. Yeah. So the key to resolving samskaras is to bring consciousness to them. But that's very hard, because the samskara itself will become triggered in that process and release that emotional hurt, emotional pain that's imprinted in there. In fact, as we're going through our life, our samskaras are constantly being triggered. Constantly, we're being triggered. And this emotional memories that we have within our astral field are constantly expressing. And it gives us our emotional life, you might say, the feeling of hurt or woundedness that we carry through with us every day.
I think I've heard you refer to it in your work that you're clearing one?
Yeah,
I mean,
you're clearing one, yeah.
So your work can actually accomplish that.
It does do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the idea of it, as does meditation and yogic practices and these things as well. Yeah. So we're really looking to clear samskaras, which is really clearing the subconscious mind, or as we would call it in my work, the basement.
Could spend a lifetime doing it.
Well, you can, because it's an infinite ocean.
Yeah.
It's an infinite ocean.
How does meditation achieve it then?
Well, it brings light, because when you meditate, you're basically bringing stillness or consciousness to that. See, what consciousness will do when you meditate, it'll actually start to break this layer up. It starts to fragment it. Because this is a very high frequency here. This is a very low frequency here. If you bring something that's a high frequency to a low frequency, that which is low frequency will start to shatter. It'll start to fragment. So when you meditate, basically you're bringing in stillness, you're bringing in light into the astral body, which breaks it up and fragments it. But that can release all manner of hell, in a way. Because what you can then experience after that is some emotional trauma, some emotional pain, some memories from your past will come up into your consciousness as the light comes in and sponges them, cleans them.